Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Hello friends and learners of Indian Poetics, and the unit consists of Vangmaya, Kavya, Sahitya, Kavyabhed. It is more about Vangmaya and Sahitya and Kavya. This video and this unit will focus on what poetry is, what are the causes of poetry, what are the purposes of poetry, what is Sahitya, and what are the different parts of, different categories of, different genres of poetry. So I welcome you to this beautiful video, beautiful unit, which will give you a lot of knowledge about literary theory, because what is literature is important to know. What is poetry and what are the types of poetry? So this is in a way introduction to the study of literature. I had referred to W.H. Hudson, very famous English writer, who had written a book called An Introduction to the Study of Literature, which describes what is literature, what are the causes of literature, what are the major themes of literature, and why do we need literature. I think in this video you will learn about all these things, including Indian poetics and even Western poetics. Definitions of Kavya is soul of literature. In fact, Kavya, poetry, is the soul of literature. In all literary genres like novel, short story, and others, you will find that the most important of all genres of literature is poetry. Poetry is the soul of poetry. In prose, a person can express his ideas in detail. In poetry, there is a precise presentation, very terse presentation, and it contains a lot of meaning, even though it may have a few sentences or even two sentences. And that is why when we read great literature, it is like mantra. As mantra has a deeper meaning, profound meaning, the same thing applies to poetry. Poetry is like a mantra. It is musical utterance. In poetry, there is a musicality, there is musical element, there is an element of rhythm which creates aesthetic delight. It is also the criticism of life, and poetry interprets life, describes life, and it presents before you what life is. Life may be full of happiness, full of sorrow, and yet life is important. P.B. Shelley, in his famous poem, says, "We look before and after and pine for what is not." We look before and after. Before and after means we look into the future, we look into the past, and pine for what is not. And we desire, we crave for what is not. We are not happy with what we have. We want something which we don't have. This kind of craving creates sorrow, unhappiness in human life. Further, B.B. Shelley says, "Our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought." What are the sweetest songs? Sweetest songs are the songs of sorrow. Sorrow is very important in life. Only happiness is not important in life. Because without the understanding of sorrow, without the experience of sorrow, we can never understand what happiness is, what joy is. Joy comes in your life when you have undergone sorrow. So, our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought, and our sweetest laughter with some pain is fraught. And even when we laugh, in our laughter, there are tears behind our laughter. Laughter is the result of sorrow that you had undergone, and now you feel relief, and this relief and happiness brings you happiness in your life. So poetry does the same thing. Poetry is a criticism of life that describes the different aspects of life, and it provides aesthetic delight. The major purpose of kavya, of poetry, is to provide aesthetic delight, aesthetic pleasure. It contains rasa, vakrokti, auchitya, dhvani, and alankaras. We have already discussed most of these topics, that literature, poetry, according to Sanskrit Poetics, contains rasa, vakrokti, auchitya, dhvani, and alankaras. It is a fusion of shabda and artha. Vangmaya says poetry is a combination, fusion of shabda, word, and artha, meaning. It is a group of sounds that present ideas, intended purpose of the poet. And Dandin says that poetry is a group of words that present ideas, and these ideas are the purpose of the poet. It is also the union of sound and sense, with gunas and without flaws. What is good poetry? A good poetry is a beautiful union, combination of sound and sense, with gunas and without any blemishes, without any shortcomings, without any flaws, without any doshas. Denotative is the body of poetry. Suggestive is the soul of poetry. The direct meaning presented by Abhidha is the body of poetry. It presents only what the particular thing is, what the object is. But suggestive is the soul of poetry. And Vyanjana, which is suggestive, is the soul of poetry. History of Poetics. Now this is a brief introduction to history of poetics. Indian poetics started with Natya Shastra by Bharat Muni, who wrote Natya Shastra and presented rasa theory, and he related rasa theory to poetry, to drama, to dance, and to other arts also. Of course, however, the application of rasa theory to other arts came later. But in Bharat Muni's mind, the basic thing was rasa theory, rasa. Without rasa, there is nothing. Poetry is not possible. Literature cannot be created. No dance can be created. No abhinay, acting, happens without rasa theory, without rasa. There are basic rasas which are the part of the entire universe, and we will discuss about it in the further videos. The history of poetics contains three kinds of poeticians: originators, compilers, and commentators. There are different kinds of theorists and poeticians. Some poeticians are originators. They have created or presented new idea, new concept, and they are called originators, pioneers, exponents. They are Bharata, Bamaha, Vamana, Anandavardhan, and Kuntak. They are originator. They have introduced something new, something different. And compilers are like they compile together, they express their views, but by compiling. And they are Mammat, who has written a famous book called Kavyabhed, Viswanatha, and Pandit Jagannath. They are three great compilers. Mammat is very famous, and commentators. There are some commentators who have commented upon different theories of poetics. Udbhat, Srimukh, Bhattanayaka, and Bhattatota, Abhinav Gupta. They are all commentators whose comments are important for learning. What are the elements of poetry? The elements of poetry are Kavya Swarupa, that is nature of poetry, causes of poetry, purpose of poetry, Shabda Shakti, Dhvani, Alankaras, Rasa, Riti, Gunadosha, and Natya Vidhan. Now these are the elements of poetry which have been discussed in Indian poetics. What is Kavya Swarupa? Kavya Swarupa is what is the nature of poetry. What are the causes? How is poetry born? What creates poetry? They are the causes. And what is the purpose of poetry? What is the goal, the aim, purpose of poetry? Shabda Shakti, we have already discussed it. Dhvani, Alankar, Ras, Riti, Gunadosha, These are some of the theories which are the parts of, the elements of poetry. And Natya Vidhana, how Natak, a drama, a Natya can be performed. Performance of drama is very important. Poetry, for example, is just for reading or hearing at the most. While in Natya Shastra, in Natya Vidhana, there is a performance of the drama on the stage, and it requires many things which is not necessary in other genres like poetry or short story or novel. Of course, it is said that novel is a drama in a pocket. Means when you read a novel, you feel like drama. That is true. But performance of drama on the stage requires many new things. Many things like costume, dialogues, swagatokti, how to perform on the stage. So this is called Natya Vidhana, which is also the elements of poetry according to Bharata Muni and Indian Poetics. Schools of poetics and their theorists. In Indian poetics, there are several schools of poetics, and their major theories are as follows. In Rasa theory, the pioneer is Bharata Muni and then Dhananjay. They are the exponents of Rasa school or Rasa theory. Alankar theory is supported and exponent of this theory are Vangmaya, Dandin and Rudrata. Vangmaya was a great critic who has for the first time introduced what figures of speech are. What are the alankaras, embellishment. The beauty of poetry is created through alankaras only. Dandin and Rudrat, they were the supporters of Alankar theory. Riti theory is propagated by Vaman. Riti theory is about style, about language, and Vaman focused more on Riti, that is style and language and diction. Dhvani is another important school of Indian poetics whose exponents are Anandavardhan and Abhinav Gupta. They exposed what Dhvani is. And Kuntak was the exponent of Vakrokti, which is curved utterance, indirect utterance, which creates different kind of meaning, different kind of impact on the mind of the audience, on the mind of the readers, on the mind of the bhavakas. And Kshemendra, who was a Kashmirian scholar, presented Auchitya theory, which is the theory of propriety, which is the theory of appropriateness. What is Uchit? Uchit is very necessary. Suitability, matching, and coherence are the part of Auchitya. So these are the basic and major theories of Indian poetics. Definition of Sahitya. The root word Sahita, being together. The root word of Sahitya is Sahita. Sahita means with, being together. Literature consists of several aspects, and together it creates literature, and that is why it is called Sahitya. Binding of Shabda and Artha. In literature, there is a binding of Shabda and Artha. It applies to Kavya also, Shabda and Artha combination. Generally, it refers to written or oral works of art. Now, Sahitya refers to written or oral work. There are two kinds of literature which are found all over the world. One is oral and the other is written. In India, in Gujarat and other parts, we have oral literature also, which is called Lok Sahitya, which is the part of the culture, which is the part of the masses, people. For example, during the wedding ceremony, women sing songs, Lagna Gita. These Lagna Gitas are also the part of oral literature. In the same way, Duha, Chopai, Chanda, which are presented by Charanas, by Gadvis, and bards. In English, they are called bards. These bards present this art, and in our country, we should be in our state, Gujarat and Saurashtra. Jhaverchand Meghani revived folk literature, because India, actually entire India, is rich in oral literature, and Saurashtra is probably the best among other parts of India where folk literature or folk art, folk dance, folk songs are, they prevail there. So it refers to written as well as oral works of art. There are two kinds of literature, oral and written. It covers all forms of Vangmaya, and literature covers all kinds of Vangmaya: grammar, philosophy, logic, law, medicine, and so on. In fact, it contains all written material, and it is called Sahitya in a general manner, not literature proper, but literature in general, which means any written material. Creative literature, which is literature proper, includes drama, poetry, and other genres. Other genres of literature are poetry, drama, novel, short story, fiction and non-fiction. So there are genres and subgenres. Rajashekhar called it fifth Veda. Rajashekhar, a great pioneer of literary criticism, called that literature, Sahitya, is a fifth Veda. There is a creative use of language with suggestive meaning. In literature also, like poetry, there is a creative use of language. There is a use of suggestive meaning, suggestive language. Other characteristics are functionality, fictionality. In fact, the word should be fictionality. It is an imagination, fiction, not real, but imagination. In novel or short story or poem, there is imagination, not reality. Suggestive language, and the language is suggestive. And aesthetic pleasure, which is provided by Sahitya, by Kavya, and by all kinds of literature. Ambiguity. Sometimes the meaning is not very clear. It means that literature has a deeper meaning which requires deeper understanding. And there is a multiple or there are different kinds of interpretations in literature. So it creates ambiguity. Sometimes it is not possible to understand literature. T.S. Eliot's famous book, The Waste Land, is very difficult to understand. Word by word, if you go ahead, you may not understand everything. It requires the help of other critics, other interpreters. Then only you can understand it. Natural world is factual, while literary world is imaginative and suggestive. Now there are two kinds of worlds. One is natural world, which is a factual word. It presents fact, it presents reality, it presents an object, while literary word is imaginative and suggestive. It has Vyangyartha, and litera means letters. In literature, there should be creative merits. A poet should have creative merits. There should be criticism of life, finer spirit of all knowledge. Literature presents the essence of knowledge. And that is why it is said about Bhagavad Gita, that Bhagavad Gita is Navanita. Navanit means butter. Butter is the essence of milk. The same thing applies to all great literature. Literature presents the finer spirit of knowledge. Literature is interpretation of human life and society. Literature depicts human life, describes society, and interprets it. It reflects nature, society, and general human life. Literature is like a mirror. It reflects nature, society, and human life. The best expression of the best thoughts. In literature, the best thoughts are expressed in best language. There is a combination of sabda and artha. Literature is written and oral also. It contains drama, prose, and poetry. There are uses of rasa, alankaras, vakrokti, and riti. It provides aesthetic delight and multiple interpretation of literature. Literature can be described can be interpreted in a different way, multiple way. It includes drashya and savya. In Kavyabhed, genus of literary works, there are natya, mahakavya, katha, akhyayika, etc., or narratives of God. There are stories about God, narratives about God, fiction, and art-related works. In Kavyabhed, that is in different genres of literature, you can find natak, drama, natya, mahakavya, epic, Katha, detailed narrative story. Akhyayika, in our country we have Akhyana about various gods and bhaktas. There are stories about Prahalad, about Sravan, about Harishchandra. They are all called Akhyans. And Akhyans were presented before people by the narrators. There are narratives of God, and there are also fiction and art related work. If we look at this figure, you will find that Kavya has two different categories, Drashya and Shravya. Drashya means visual and Shravya means auditory, which you can hear, and Drashya means which you can see. In Drashya, there are two major categories, Rupaka and Uparupaka. They are the part of drama. And in Shravya, there are Gadya and Padya, prose and verse. Rupakas are divided in 10 varieties. In Rupak, there are 10 kinds of varieties. Natak, Prakarana, Bhana, Vyayoga, Samvakra, Bimb, Ihimugra, Anka, Ank means act, and Vithi and Prahasana. These are the 10 categories of Rupaka, in which Natak is also included. And Uparupaka is a play within play. And Uparupaka means there is a drama within the drama. There are such examples in the world literature. There is a very famous drama by William Shakespeare, Hamlet, in which there is a drama in the drama. So within the drama there is a drama which is called Uparupaka. And Padya includes Muktak, Mahakavya, Khandakavya and Kosha, that is narrative poem. In Gadya we have Katha, Akhyayika, Virudha and Krambhaka. Champu is a folk literary form. Champu is an Indian folk literary form, and Virud is a prose narrative. So with this discussion about Kavya and Sahitya, we end this video. Thank you very much. Thank you.